From the Citadel Archives, this is the story of the world that was, and the princess who survived to tell the tale. Hi everyone, my name is Whitney Welsh Gibbs. I am the author of the Steel Citadel series, The Land of Frost being the first book in the Steel Citadel series, and I am so glad that you are here with me today to take a little deep dive into that story, specifically into Maeve Moran, our main character of the story. Today we're going to talk a little bit about her before the coup, her after the coup, what her identity is, kind of in that space in between, and what she's really becoming in this first book, The Land of Frost, in this series. Spoiler warning, if you have not read The Land of Frost, now is a good time to pause this podcast and to come back as soon as you have, so you can take a deep dive with us. We are going to be talking about some things that might go a little bit deeper than surface level, might spoil a few things if you haven't read the books yet, but I welcome you to do so. They're available in paperback, ebook, hardcover, and also on Kindle Unlimited, so we would love to have you read the book and then come back and join us for our discussion. Well, for those of you who are staying with us today, our first episode was all about the world of Draoconi, our kingdom, what it kind of looked like before the coup, how the setup really influences the story as a whole, how that kingdom, that political kind of undertone really sets the stage for this story, this series as a whole. But now we're going to talk about the main character, Maeve. Maeve, as you know, if you've read the book, is a princess in this kingdom of Draoconi, and we meet her on her wedding day as a coup breaks out and takes her family from her. And that kind of sets the stage for our whole story of vengeance and of getting back to that throne that she so rightfully believes is hers. And it's just our catalyst for everything that Maeve is. And Maeve really does have a huge journey ahead of her in this series. And you know, it really starts before the coup, but we get to meet her that morning of, so we don't see a lot of her before. So today we're going to take a look at kind of like her before, during, after, all that good stuff, and kind of break her down a little bit. She is a kind of a complex character. She's very different from you and I in a lot of different ways, and similar in so many ways as well. So we're going to break down those kind of similarities and also those differences and how we can see the world from her eyes. First and foremost, we should talk about who Maeve was before the coup and how much of her identity really survives that coup. And let me just say, I think that by the end of The Land of Frost, there's an undertone of things that she has experienced throughout her life, but who she is really starting to be redefined. And that identity is definitely not the same as what it was before the coup and when we first meet her in those first few pages of the book. Like I said, we meet her really close to when everything happens. I mean, the first 10 pages are when the coup happens. So we kind of meet her in this kind of moment where everything is pulled out from underneath her. But we do get a good picture of who she is. She is a princess. She is sheltered from the world. She has never left the castle, as far as we know, right? She's never left the castle. And she's never been within the public eye. She doesn't know her kingdom. She really doesn't know what to believe beyond what she's been told. Her teaching from her tutors and, you know, her understanding of the world is very limited because it comes from like approved sources. She's not out there. She's not talking to other people. She's not making friends. In fact, the one friend we even have mentioned beyond like family in this first book prior to the coup is there's a little bit of talk when she first meets Ryan, her fiance, about this little child that she's playing with in the garden who is the cook's child. And so she really has no interaction with anybody within this world. So her identity very much is the princess and really relies on her usefulness within this realm. We know what her magic is. We know that she has healing magic that kind of manifests in her hair, which is unique to her. We don't really see that in anybody else. We don't see a manifestation of magic like that is a physical manifestation of their individual magic. But Maeve's does. And this healing magic, we know, has been used by the king, and it's been told that her brother would carry it with him. Do we know if he used it or not? We don't know. We were just told that he carries it on the battlefield. And her father, of course, yes, we can imagine that was very valuable to him. So her worth and her identity really comes from this magic that she has and her title as princess. And does it give her kind of a say in what's going on? Does it give her any sort of leverage in the workings of the world? Not really. In fact, I would say she has the least amount of leverage out of anybody, and least amount of say out of anyone within those castle walls. And certainly probably within society. She's the most closed off person you're going to meet in society, because she doesn't live among society at all. So her identity is really just tethered to that title and then what her dad needs from her, her family needs from her. And not much of that survives during this coup, right? Physically, it's taken away. Her magic is stripped from her. Her family's taken from her. So she's left for dead. So seemingly her title's taken from her, right? If there's a coup to overthrow her family. So that doesn't survive. And beyond that, what does she have? Not much. And we have this idea of starting at the basics, because she hasn't left the castle, so she doesn't really know anything about life too much. So we're starting to strip her down completely and say, okay, this is a new form. How is she going to rebuild and become who she is in this world? And so I would say by the end of the book, because she didn't have this identity, like I said, I believe that she becomes a completely different person. Not much of that survives beyond perhaps trauma. And that is a big theme in Maeve's life, is trauma. And we can't discount that, because trauma does do a lot of things to us mentally. It also shapes the way we react in situations. So that is a big part of her life. But beyond the identity that she knew herself as, she's no longer that person. She might hold tightly to the name Princess Maeve Moran, but she is not that princess anymore. And we were talking about it here. We're talking about, her worth as a human and a princess in the castle prior to the coup. And she's really treated as a resource long before she's violated in public, long before this coup happens. So in reality, did she ever truly belong to herself? I think the answer is no. I think that she was only useful in that time. And we can see it by the way she was isolated, by the way that she was not allowed to have a voice or to have a role in society, a role in governing, a say in pretty much anything. She was more like a property than she was even really a princess. If that is her identity, it's almost a mistaken identity, right? Her identity is more so and it's a terrible thing, and I think it happens in society a lot too, is she's seen as property rather than a person. And it's a sad truth. But her value comes from what she can give rather than her thoughts, her beliefs, her talents, and anything that is intrinsically hers. What we are beyond our body, right? Our physical selves is a mind with thoughts and opinions and just an incredible ability to change the world. And Maeve is stripped of that long before even that coup that assumes her dead. She's stripped of that ability to use any of those things that make us human and make us valuable as a human. So really, sadly, and it's kind of highlighting how women are generally seen, or have been generally seen in history, as more like property. They're great for their uses, right? If a woman can bear a child, they're pretty valuable to their household, but not valuable because they have a voice or they're individual. or, they have opinions that matter, or they can change the world in some way beyond birthing children. That has so often been the case. And we see it kind of here with Maeve. We see it in a different way. Her body is actually so violated. And we learn that later on in the story. We learn that she's been made barren and she couldn't even facilitate a family if she wanted to. So that's not even her worth there, but her worth is this healing magic. And so she's brought down to like one singular thing that she's useful for. And it's a sad, sad reality, and it's a sad, sad truth. And it really shows that she was never meant to play a role beyond that, even though she is so valuable. And we see that she's tricky and funny and smart. And as she learns, she gets even smarter and sharper. And it's sad to see. But it has to be a stark contrast, because it's not that she lived a necessarily comfortable life before the coup. And I think that the public perception of her and what we would assume from a princess, quote unquote, is that they do live a very comfortable kind of life, privileged life. But Maeve, that's not the case at all. And so we see that harsh reality of what it means to be a princess in this world. And it's not fun. It's not good. And it's really quite sad. And so it's breaking down those levels, those barriers of who her character is and what she's been through in her life. And it's interesting because Maeve is probably the only character we see in the Land of Frost. We hear about these high crimes in society, and one of the high crimes is siphoning magic, but we haven't technically seen it done in the story. But we do hear and we do know that Maeve is one person that their magic is extractable, because they extract it from her and they have it for their own use. And it's interesting because it's healing. So healing is a service, right? And it's also a power that other people see that as being entitled to because it's precious. And the simple fact that her magic is something that is precious, is valuable, and then can be taken from her is a really dangerous thing, because it's useful magic. So it becomes, well, how much can we use? And how much will she allow us to use? I mean, Maeve wasn't really given a choice from a young age, but how much will she allow us to use? And the question is if she ever fought back and said, no, you can't have my magic. No, that's too much. No, it belongs to me. Now you are harming me to have the power to heal yourself. Would they still take it? And I imagine the answer would probably be yes. Because what do powerful people do when there's something useful, a resource, and they don't recognize that person beyond that utility or beyond that resource? We've seen in history, like the resources on the savannas of Africa and the animals that have been killed in game hunting because their resources were useful, or the overlogging in South America so that we had wood and paper and that sort of stuff. And it's torn down whole rainforests, and it's killed tribes and societies, and elephants are endangered species and things like that, because they're seen as a resource and not as something that's valuable to be preserved. And I think Maeve is seen so often like that, and has been seen so often like that, as a resource that is not something valuable to preserve beyond the resource. So it becomes very dangerous for her. I think that she was in a dangerous spot even before the coup. I think she's in the most dangerous spot even before the coup. And after the coup, she continues to be in danger, but for different reasons. And so I don't think she's ever lived in a time where there's peace and any sort of safety for her. And so we see in the coup, her family, she loses her family. And then there's also this moment where they bring her out and her hair is shaved off her head to take her magic from her, right? And we see it from the standpoint of, oh, they're trying to take away her power so they can kill her. And in all cases, that's pretty much true, right? They're taking away her power because if she has healing power, how do they kill her? They can bring her to the brink of death, but she's going to heal. If they take away her power in a very practical sense, they can get rid of her very easily. And who knows, it might just take taking away her power to get rid of her. They didn't take a lot of care to kill her in that coup like they did her family. They made sure her family was dead, but as far as her, they kind of said, here you are to the crowd, take her and deal with her as you see fit. So they kind of left it to them. They might have believed that taking away her hair could essentially just kill her anyways. And it was in fact, a way to silence her power, but it also redefines her and redefines her power and what it means to be powerless and find the power within you despite that loss, which is symbolic in a way because Maeve really just has to find her power to continue on when she's the only one left in her family anyways. So it's the same, it's kind of like the mirror image, right? She's lost everything. She's lost her title. And now she has to redefine herself. And when she loses her magic, she also has to redefine herself to get along, right? You can't keep breaking bones and being reckless with yourself, if she ever was, if you can't heal. And so you have to redefine what it looks like to exist in a world now where you can't heal. It's also very liberating because if she sheds that power, if she sheds her family, when we look at it from like the overall angle of the coup, if she sheds everything, she's liberated, she's free to find the other strengths within her, the other defining characters within her. Like we said, if she's seen as property for so long and not necessarily a valuable human being, despite her magic or with separate from her magic, this is a liberating moment to actually figure out who she is. And it's a terrible thing to have happen, but it's almost a gift. And it really asks the question, or begs the question, whether magic is something she has or something she is. And she really has to understand that, like, in her own life, and kind of move forward with the idea of, like, if magic is what I am, can I live without it? Or is it, if it's what I have, that's a better spot for me to be in because I can live without it. I just have to redefine myself. If it's what I am, then I don't know how to move forward. But if it's only what I have, then I can find a different way. And Maeve survives. Maeve survives when everyone else dies. And like I said, it's a terrible thing that happens. But is it a gift? Is it a punishment or a responsibility? And in a lot of ways, it's kind of all three. I think immediately she believes that it's a punishment. She's found alive. She's in a really bad way. She almost doesn't want to be alive because of how terrible it is. So that's a punishing reality. Being all alone, not knowing the world at all, not understanding what she needs to do to move forward and to become whole again. Then she understands the weight of what it means to be the last survivor within her family, as far as, the weight of the world on her shoulders, but also the weight of the crown on her head. There is one crown in this kingdom and one Moran left in this kingdom. That responsibility now becomes hers to get it back for her family. And then really, if we're talking about redefining herself as not property, but as a person, as a princess, if she were to retake the throne as a queen, it might be a very beautiful gift that she has to rebuild. It's a very tragic gift. It's something that you hope to never have, but she has this opportunity now to really build herself up in a way that she might never have gotten within the castle walls. If her family survived, if the coup did not break out, she could honestly maybe even become more than what she was ever going to be. And she begins to kind of rewrite her identity there. She begins to rewrite her future with that gift. And that's why I do say that sometimes, though it is a tragedy and it does feel like punishment and it is very traumatic, which again, like I said, trauma is, and those lived traumatic experiences are at the center of this whole conversation about Maeve, because Maeve is built on the traumas that she's faced, and everything that she does is, reflective of that. But in that process, and having this moment to be the one and only survivor, she gets to rewrite that identity and really define it as her own. And we see her do that at the prison so well. She honestly strips herself even further, and I think with Galgalesh's help, she strips herself even further. She takes her name and she changes it for her own safety, but she changes it and creates in her this new person that could be anything, that could redefine how people see her. And they don't see her as a princess, and thank goodness for that when she's at Boscagar, because she would be in a lot of danger if they did. But that means that she could take that time to learn how to be strong and a survivor and a fighter, and learn who she is underneath it all, if even her name is not her name anymore. And I really like that about her. I like that she's kind of forced to find out who she is when it truly comes down to it. So many of us probably wouldn't know what to do if we couldn't even be called what we're called. And Maeve, she takes it and goes, like, for her own survival. And what a brave soul she is to do that. It's just, it's a cool moment. It's a sad moment, but it's very, very cool to watch her kind of become Maeve 2.0. And, Maeve, she does this through, like I said, Galgalesh really helps her and kind of propels her to do this. And then we meet Owen, and Owen definitely does as well. He is a conduit to her gaining agency and gaining a voice. And sometimes it's through fighting, right? She doesn't know why he acts the way he does with her, but also it pushes her to kind of like change or grow in herself in order to kind of meet the moment, especially when they are just really going at it. Just kind of meet him in that moment and say, hey, no, this is me, and I will not be moved. I've been moved too much in my life. I will not be moved again. And so she gains this agency in this book by the end of the book. And, I think a lot of it's not an illusion, because she becomes a stronger person in her own right. But in saying that, I think she recognizes, and I think we as readers recognize, that in that agency, she has to balance freedom and self-reliance with the absolute necessity that you can't get back what you lost on your own, and that there has to be people at your side to do so. And that's a hard truth too, especially when you're redefining yourself and you're left all on your own. It's a very stark reality that you just start to begin to live in as independence. And I think that it would be hard to open up and to trust, and to know that you would have to kind of lean in on other people in order to get back to where you want to be. But in that, she finds a supportive group that really does value her say in things. She doesn't have all the right answers, so they have to guide her through them. And she doesn't know enough about the world yet to have all the right answers, but they do appreciate her enough to where she has a voice once again and has that agency. And it's such a different kind of breath of fresh air from what she's ever known. And sometimes I don't think she knows how to really exercise that voice and that agency she has. And so I think she gets frustrated easily. And, even when they challenge her to think deeper or to go further in that agency for her own good, I think sometimes she doesn't understand how to do so. But it's really cool that she luckily surrounds herself by these people that really want to see her succeed and see her be strong. And so she gets this agency that's not an illusion. It's not the princess title, right? It's actually kind of the opposite of the princess title, because with princess, we all thought that she had a cozy, great life, and it turns out she didn't have any of that. And then here she doesn't have this title, and she really has more of a voice, more of a say, more of a life than she ever would have as a princess. So I think it's really cool. And then, I think she becomes like this dangerous type of like feral badass. She doesn't have her magic anymore, but she's learning. She's, gaining the skills to fight and to understand really what's going on in the world beyond like physical strength. And she's never going to be as strong and as warrior ready as some of these people that have been training forever. And I don't want her to be. I want her to be, not always perfect at fighting. I want her to be a little bit herself, which she's just this princess who's learning to survive. And so she's not going to be able to take down the biggest baddie in the world, of course. But she is more dangerous, I think, now as she's learning, and she's learning like the world. And I think knowledge is the most dangerous thing in the world and the most amazing thing in the world. You can be a dangerous woman if you know what to do and you know your rights and you know what the world is. You're a very dangerous woman to the people that are out to get you. And Maeve becomes this dangerous person, and not a terrible person, but a dangerous one for those people who underestimated her and for those people that left her to die. And she really doesn't need that magic to be powerful. We are reframing that power with that willingness to act and that willingness to stand up for what she believes. And I think that's so super cool. I love the fact that she gets to do that and gets to become this person even despite what she lacks. I think that's so cool. And by the end of book 1, Maeve's future is uncertain, but we know that she didn't die that day. She didn't die all those months at Boscagar. And I think she's really moving towards restoration, maybe. She really wants that revenge. I think she wants her old title back, but in a new way. So she's moving towards kind of like 3 goals, all of which are so different but also interconnected. Restoration of what she has lost, revenge for what was taken from her. I'm not sure she can restore without that revenge. And then, of course, that reinvention where she's coming back. Maybe she's coming back as princess or as queen. We haven't seen it yet, so we don't know, but reinventing what that looks like now that she's been out in the world, and how starkly different that could be from what she ever was, and really finding her true self in that, where she could say, yes, I am Princess Maeve Moran, but I'm not the same Maeve Moran that you left for dead. And that's okay, because you're going to wish you would have killed me before. And that's so cool to me to see that kind of change in her. And I look forward to, as the series goes on, readers being able to see how that is. Still trauma influenced, right? Still living through the experiences she's had, and not perfect at all, not by any kind of measure. She's not perfect. And her past is going to continue to come up, because she's not very far out. By the end of this book, we're not even a year out of what happened to her. And there's a lot that she's lived through that the further away she gets from it, the more she's going to realize how traumatic and how not normal those experiences were that she had. So she really has to start to balance that too, because the trauma will come up, because she's a person that has been lived a life that has not been great, but still she's continuing to grow that person, and by facing those things head on. And I think we've just gotten started in book 1, seeing kind of what that person can be, and how messy that road can be, how it's not a straight line, but it makes for this character that just gets to be herself and gets to find out who that is. So I'm really excited at the end of book 1 to kind of let readers meet Maeve kind of for the first time again by the end of that book. Well, I thank you for joining me on this conversation, this little deep dive into Maeve Moran, one of my favorite characters I've ever written, and the main protagonist of The Land of Frost. Next time, we're going to dive into another topic on The Land of Frost, this book 1, as we explore it a little bit deeper. I hope you join me, and until next time, keep reading.